Human beings are amongst the most industrious, the most creative, the most active creatures on earth. Observing people in everyday life simply shows us that as humanity, we find diverse ways of plying our trade. When we talk about industry, it covers a very broad spectrum. All of these active people going about their daily lives engaged in something constructive belong to households. And as we saw in episode 1, households spend their money in supermarkets and stores. But where do households spend that income that they have left behind? They queue up and leave that money as deposits that banks will hold on to and lend to businesses. Industry is just as diverse as and complex, so to say, as human society. We have a wide range of sectors, from manufacturing to the construction to the automobile industry. The spectrum is very broad in terms of what human beings manufacture and produce. Now, this entails that money supply has to be diligently managed, ensuring that banks have adequate supply of money that keep the flow between industries and households well lubricated, with money moving between these sectors. What I'd hope you'd gain from the first episode is that if anyone were to ask you why a developing country struggles with poverty, why it has a certain number of people below the poverty line, that you'd be able to answer, rather than the common standard answer, which is it's poor governance, it's misappropriation of resources, it's lack of skills. I hope this broadens your perspective to now look at the actual workings of the economy itself that we've really inherited from a Western or an industrialized setting and adopted into our own economies. You should be able to look and say, well, the reason why these countries experience those conditions is because there is a problem with the actual mechanism, the economy itself, that generates scarcity that leads to these conditions that we see. So it's not necessarily a negative condition brought about by human beings, but it is a technical problem created by an ineffective or defective economy. Now, when we bring up the circular flow of income and scarcity, what tends to happen is the first thing people will say is that, look, if scarcity is brought about as a result of money being held by households and by industries or businesses, sort of being trapped in these entities and not being able to move between them, then what about the role that banks play? Because don't people take their income to banks and deposit their money, and don't industries and businesses take their hard-earned money and deposit that in banks? And doesn't credit creation destroy the scarcity by making sure that they hand out loans to people who seek money that they'd like to invest or money that they'd like to spend? Well, the very simple answer to that is that credit creation has very little impact on scarcity, and I'm going to explain exactly why that is. A solution to the problem of scarcity, as we've discussed, which is just below the circular flow of income, was thought to have been found with the introduction of credit creation. Now, unfortunately, credit creation which is introduced by banks and other financial services institutions, does not solve the problem of scarcity or poverty. This is due to the fact that when banks and other financial institutions lend money to industries and households, what will happen is these industries will pay out this money, either buying raw materials or paying their workers, but inevitably that income winds up in the hands of businesses and households once again. And it's the same thing when consumers or households borrow money. They go out and buy and purchase from supermarkets, malls, etc. That money winds up back in industries and then is redistributed to industries and households. So it goes back to the circular flow of income, and it doesn't actually correct the scarcity that takes place beneath the circular flow of income. So as a result, despite having widespread credit creation through the banking and financial services sector, you will find that the reproductive or the productive value of money still remains zero. Money is incapable of being productive despite the banking and financial services sector. And as a result, despite the sector being active and quite robust, it doesn't solve the problem of scarcity, and poverty continues to plague modern day economies. So, bear with me, keep watching, and I'm sure with each new episode, your mind will be opened up to a new idea, a new thought, a new way of looking at things. Now, what you've just seen is basically an explanation of why, despite having a robust banking and financial services industry in any country, you will find that credit creation does not solve the problem of scarcity. This is due to the fact that credit creation is a process by which you increase the availability of money in an economy. A person deposits $100, 100 kwacha, that $100 becomes or behaves as though it's $1,000 because people will withdraw money and redeposit it and so on. Now, when people borrow money from banks, or when businesses borrow money from banks, they inevitably spend that money. For example, households who borrow will spend that in malls, supermarkets, and so on. Businesses that borrow will spend that on wages and raw materials and so on. So basically, the money that is borrowed from credit creation or using credit creation winds up going back into the circular flow of income and getting caught beneath it between households and industries once again. So credit creation basically does not solve the problem of scarcity. And because it doesn't solve the problem of scarcity, it does not provide a solution to the fundamental problem of poverty. Remember, scarcity and poverty are basically one and the same thing. So that also points to the fact that credit creation may help an economy grow, but it is not the best financial tool for generating wealth. Remember, I did say earlier that wealth and poverty or scarcity are two sides of the same coin. So if you're not handling one, then you're not handling the other. And basically that sort of helps you understand the role of credit creation in an economy. If you're able to free up the resources that are rigid between households and industries, then basically you begin to break scarcity up and generate wealth. But unfortunately, credit creation, which is provided by the banking and financial services industry, doesn't do that. It does place more money in the hands of industries and households for them to spend and invest, but fundamentally it doesn't end scarcity. Scarcity persists in the economy or persists beneath the circular flow of income because the productive value of money continues to remain zero, as you saw with that equation, despite the fact that credit creation is active within an economy. Now, if credit creation, one of the most important financial services existing in the world today, globally, does not solve the problem of scarcity, then what it means is that there is a financial service that is missing in economies today. A very vital, crucial, important financial service that needs to run alongside credit creation, that addresses the areas that credit creation does not, that addresses scarcity moving within beneath the circular flow of income. That financial service has to be able to break up the tension between households and industries and free up those resources in order to generate the kind of wealth that brings an end to scarcity. And when you end scarcity in that way, you generate tremendous amounts of wealth, the kind of wealth where poverty cannot continue to exist in the same type of environment. If I were to name this financial service, instead of credit creation, I would call it wealth creation or resource creation, because basically it addresses wealth and scarcity directly, something that credit creation cannot do. Now, with this new financial service working within an economy, there's a complete transformation in the way businesses operate. For example, businesses begin to thrive because you find that the resources that they were losing through cost begin to be recovered. So as a result, they're able to employ more people, they're able to increase production, they're able to expand within the economy. This new service basically transforms an economy from one that is sluggish and prone to recession to one that is extremely robust, that grows rapidly, in which the potential for poverty to emerge as a result of scarcity is highly unlikely. Businesses in that basically transform the lives of the people living in that country or economy. You begin to generate the kind of wealth that ensures that no one suffers in an economy, the kind of wealth that ensures there's no unemployment, everyone has shelter, everyone has a decent standard of living. And you do that by providing a financial service that addresses the vacuum created beneath the circular flow of income and frees up those resources so that governments and economies in general can begin to apply those towards improving the standard of living.